All right, welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at Dallin H. Oakes's speech.
The powers of the priesthood.
That's it, you got it. And it's a pretty fascinating one. We're going to be kind of unpacking this whole concept of priesthood, how he describes it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was a speech given to an audience of men in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
And, he's exploring how they believe that God delegates authority to humans to kind of carry out his work.
That's right. It's kind of a core concept, and he dives into it pretty deeply in this speech. It's interesting. I think regardless of, what your background is, you probably wondered at some point how certain groups claim to act on behalf of God.
Right, right.
So how does this whole delegation of authority thing actually work?
Well, he explains that they believe this priesthood was restored in modern times. And basically, there's this direct line of authority all the way back to Jesus Christ's apostles. And he talks about
That's very
keys,
cute, yeah.
which sound a little mysterious, right?
Yeah, it sounds kind of almost like an adventure novel.
Right. It's but you can kind of think of these keys as the authority to use this priesthood power and even direct how others use it.
Okay. So it's not just about having the power, but it's about the authority to use it and to delegate it. That makes sense. He also mentions this idea that knowledge is revealed line upon line, different keys are given at different times. What does that even mean?
Imagine like a jigsaw puzzle. You don't get all the pieces at once.
Right.
You get them bit by bit, and as you fit more and more pieces together, you start to see that bigger picture. And that's how he describes, this unfolding knowledge. Each revelation, each key builds on the ones before it.
It's like each generation gets like a few more pieces of the puzzle or something.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But he's very clear in this speech that priesthood is not some kind of like VIP club or something, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, he even quotes Oakes saying that it's inaccurate to even talk about the priesthood and the women.
Right, because he's drawing a clear distinction between the power itself and the people who hold it. It's not about status. It's not about some sort of hierarchy. It's about service.
Yeah.
And he quotes Joseph F. Smith. He talked about the need for these church organizations to be fully alive to their obligations.
Yeah.
So it's not just going through the motions. It's about truly being dedicated to helping people.
So it's less about, look at my title and more about look at how I'm using this power to serve.
Exactly.
I can see how that would resonate with people.
Absolutely. And he uses this imagery of magnifying your calling. And he actually quotes Harold B. Lee,
Okay.
who describes it as being God's agent and doing his work with energy and with faith.
Okay, I get the like magnifying glass metaphor, right?
Right.
You take something important, you make its impact stronger. But what does that look like in real life?
Well, he actually tells this really cool story about a guy named Jeffrey D. Erickson,
Okay.
who was really struggling financially. He was actually thinking about dropping out of college. And his elders quorum president, which is kind of a leader in the congregation, he felt inspired to counsel this Jeffrey to stay in school.
Yeah.
And it ended up changing the course of his life.
Wow. So a small act of encouragement really had a huge ripple effect.
Exactly. And that's the whole point he's making here. It's not just about holding some title. It's about embodying this responsibility to serve, to lift, to help others.
Yeah.
And even seemingly small actions can have these massive ripple effects.
That's what magnifying your calling really means. Okay, I got it.
Hmm.
He also talks about, specific roles within this priesthood structure, specifically high priests and elders.
Uh-huh.
And he gets into like the duties and responsibilities for each one. So it makes it seem like they're a hierarchy after all, right?
There are definitely different functions within this structure, but his main point is that both of these roles have the same core purpose, which is to minister to people. You can kind of think of it like shepherds taking care of their flocks.
Yeah.
Right? You might have shepherds with different responsibilities, but they're all working together to care for the sheep.
That's a helpful way to think about it. But it's a big responsibility. I mean, he quotes a Book of Mormon prophet named Jacob,
Right.
who emphasizes how important it is for priesthood holders to really study and understand God's word.
Right.
I mean, it makes me think about like the pressure that teachers and leaders must feel. Have you ever felt like that weight of responsibility when you're trying to to guide or teach someone, especially about something spiritual.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that feeling of responsibility.
Yeah.
I think it's something that anyone who's ever tried to mentor someone or teach or lead in any capacity can relate to.
Yeah.
And it ties directly back to this whole concept of magnifying your calling. It's about recognizing this sacred trust that's been placed in you
Yeah.
and then doing everything you can to be worthy of it.
So it's not just about having the right title, it's about actually doing the work and the study and the self-reflection to make sure you're living up to the responsibility.
Yeah, it's about being the best version of yourself that you can be so that you can truly serve others.
And that sounds like a lifelong process.
It is. We never stop learning. We never stop growing.
Okay. So we've talked about this concept of priesthood as this power that's delegated from God, the importance of magnifying that calling. But how does all of this translate to like daily life? It feels very theoretical so far.
Yeah. No, that's where it gets really interesting because now he starts talking about the role of priesthood within the family.
Okay. Now we're getting into territory that I think a lot of listeners can relate to. We've been talking about this in this broader sense. Family is something everybody gets.
Right. And he makes this really interesting distinction here. He emphasizes that a father presiding in his home, he doesn't actually need permission from higher authorities
Oh, okay.
to exercise this priesthood authority. So he has this certain level of autonomy within his own family.
So it's not like he needs to like get a permission slip from a bishop or something before he gives a blessing to his kid.
Exactly. He has that authority to act as a father, as a priesthood holder within his own family. But of course, this comes with a big emphasis on responsibility.
Right. And he really emphasizes that fathers need to set a good example for their kids, work hard at building strong family relationships. It makes me think about, the role of spiritual guidance, blessings within my own family. Have you had any experiences like that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think those experiences, whether they're positive or challenging, really kind of shape our understanding of family, of faith, all of that.
For sure. And it seems like he sees, these blessings as one way that fathers can really use their priesthood, right?
Right.
Offering comfort, guidance, support to their families.
And he quotes Harold B. Lee again,
Okay.
who says this really powerful statement about the priesthood's potential to work miracles in times of crisis.
Miracles. That's a pretty big claim.
It is a big claim, but he also emphasizes that it requires worthiness to access that power.
Worthiness. Okay. Now, there's a word that could mean a lot of different things to different people. What does that actually mean in this context?
It's not about being perfect. It's not about having it all figured out. Think of it more like tuning an instrument. If a guitar is out of tune, it's not going to make beautiful music no matter how skilled the player is.
Okay.
So worthiness is about, striving to align your life, your actions with your beliefs.
So it's about like the ongoing effort to become like the best version of yourself.
Exactly.
So,
And it ties right back into that magnifying your calling thing, right? It's not just about having the position. It's about embodying that responsibility.
so we're back. And if you're just joining us, we're doing a deep dive into this speech by Dallin H. Oakes, The Powers of the Priesthood. We've been unpacking it, looking at, what it says about leadership and service, even for those who aren't familiar with, with his faith's ideas.
And we left off talking about how this concept of priesthood applies to families,
Right.
specifically the role of fathers. And, you made a point that he says a father doesn't need permission from, higher ups in his faith
Right.
to use this authority in his own home. It's almost like, in a lot of organizations, if you want to do something, you need approval from someone above you, right? But what Oakes is saying is that within the family, the father has this sort of autonomy to act when it comes to spiritual matters. It's very much about personal responsibility.
So, like, if a father wants to give a blessing to his child, he doesn't have to, like, clear it with a bishop or something.
Exactly. He's trusted to act in that role within his family. Now, it doesn't mean it's, a free-for-all. There's a big emphasis on righteousness and using this authority to serve and to guide, not to control or manipulate.
It makes me think of those like nature documentaries where you see like a lioness, fiercely protecting her cubs, but also like teaching them how to hunt, how to survive. There's that like power and deep care.
That's a great analogy. And it leads right into the next point he makes, which is about setting a good example.
Yeah.
And he quotes Harold B. Lee, who said that this priesthood, it can bring about miracles in times of need, but it requires worthiness.
Okay. worthiness. Now, there's a word that can be kind of tricky. It might sound, judgmental or exclusive to some people. How does Oakes kind of explain that idea?
It's it's not about being perfect or, having it all figured out. Think of it more like tuning an instrument, right?
Like, mhm.
If a guitar's out of tune, it's not going to make beautiful music no matter how good the musician is. Worthiness in this sense, it's about trying to align your life, your actions with what you believe.
So it's about that like ongoing effort that's striving to become the best version of yourself.
Exact. And that ties right back into what we were talking about earlier, this magnifying your calling idea.
Right.
It's not just about having the position or the title, but it's about embodying that responsibility.
Yeah.
He also shares that story of Jeffrey D. Erickson, which we talked about earlier. Just as an example of how these small actions can really have a big impact. It makes me wonder, for our listeners out there, what are some ways that they can apply these ideas in their own lives, even if they don't, identify with this particular faith tradition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the big takeaways here is this concept of viewing your life's purpose as a type of calling.
Right.
So even if you don't use that term, that label priesthood,
Yeah.
you can still kind of embrace this idea of acting as an agent for good in the world, of really striving to make a positive difference.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we all have this potential to influence others, to uplift, to inspire, to contribute to something larger than ourselves.
It's like that quote about the most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart, right?
Yeah.
It's about that impact that we have on each other, those little unseen ripples of kindness and service.
I love that. It reminds me of something he said toward the end of his speech, which really resonated with me. He challenges us to think about, what it would look like to truly magnify that potential for good.
Yeah.
If we approach our everyday lives with that same level of dedication that we might bring to, a formal calling, a formal position, like what kind of impact could we have?
That's a really powerful question. It makes you really kind of stop and think about your priorities, you know?
Exactly. And it brings us to this idea of leadership, not necessarily in the traditional sense of having a position or a title,
Right.
but in the sense of taking ownership of your sphere of influence.
So it's not about waiting for someone to give you permission or tell you what to do. It's about like, okay, what can I do right now to make a difference?
That's it. And that brings us to a really crucial part of his message where he talks about balance. He acknowledges that people have different callings, different responsibilities in life.
Mhm.
And there's no, one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, so it's not about like everyone dropping everything and devoting themselves solely to, church service or community work or something.
Right, right. He acknowledges people have families, they have jobs, they have other commitments.
Right.
And it's about finding that sweet spot where you're able to fulfill your responsibilities, but still make time for service and personal growth.
Yeah.
And, he even gives this great example of a woman who wasn't able to serve in a formal church calling because of her, demanding job.
Mm.
But she found ways to magnify her influence through, acts of kindness and compassion in her workplace.
Right. That's a great reminder that service doesn't have to be this like grand formal thing,
Right.
right? It can be, woven into the fabric of our everyday lives.
Exactly. It could be as simple as, listening to a friend who needs to vent,
Hmm.
offering to help a neighbor, mentoring someone who's younger than you. It's about looking for those opportunities to use your talents, your abilities,
Right.
to uplift and bless others.
And it sounds like that can take a lot of different forms depending on, your circumstances and your personality.
Oh, for sure. And he really emphasizes that everyone has something unique to offer.
Right.
It's not about comparing yourself to others or trying to fit into some sort of mold.
Yeah.
It's about embracing your own strengths
Mm.
and finding ways to use those to make a difference.
So what you're saying is like, even though this speech is rooted in, a specific religious context,
Mm-hmm.
there are some pretty universal principles that really anyone can apply to their lives.
That's the beauty of it. We can take these ideas about service, about leadership, about personal growth,
Right.
and we can apply them anywhere. Whether you're a CEO or a stay-at-home parent, a student, an artist,
Mm-hmm.
there's always room to magnify that influence, to make a positive impact.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about, finding balance, recognizing your unique talents, looking for those everyday opportunities to serve. What else does he emphasize in this last part of the speech?
One thing he really stresses is being intentional. You know,
Okay.
it's not enough to just have good intentions.
Right.
So you got to follow through. And he uses this analogy of a gardener, right?
Okay.
Someone who's carefully tending to their plants, watering them, weeding them, making sure they have enough sun.
So it's not just about planting a seed and hoping for the best. It's about putting in that consistent effort
Exactly.
to nurture growth.
Exactly. And that applies to our own personal growth as well.
Yeah.
He talks about lifelong learning, seeking out new experiences, constantly striving to become better.
He's really a proponent of that growth mindset, right?
Yes.
That belief that you can always learn and improve no matter where you are in life.
Mm-hmm. And he acknowledges, that it's not always easy. There are going to be challenges, setbacks.
Right, moments of self-doubt. But he really encourages us to embrace those challenges as opportunities for learning, Yeah. To never give up on that pursuit of becoming more like our ideal selves.
It's a really encouraging message, especially in a world that often feels, so pressured and fast-paced.
Yeah.
It's kind of a reminder to be patient with ourselves, and trust the process.
Exactly. And to remember that even those small acts of kindness and service can have that ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
That we may not even see.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this part 2 of our deep dive, what's one key takeaway you want our listeners to hold on to?
I think the most important thing is that we all have this potential to be leaders and agents of good in our own unique way. It's not about titles or positions. It's about how we show up, the everyday choices we make to uplift, to inspire, to make that difference.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
Absolutely. We're always learning, we're always growing, and we're always finding those new ways to kind of magnify our impact.
Absolutely. And that's what makes life so exciting.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I know our listeners are eager to hear the final part of our deep dive into this powerful message. So be sure to join us in part 3. We're going to be delving into some practical applications of these principles and leave you with some thought-provoking questions to ponder.
Yeah.
Welcome back to part 3 of our deep dive into the powers of the priesthood, Dallin H. Oakes' speech. If you've been with us for parts 1 and 2, we've been kind of digging into some pretty thought-provoking concepts, right? About leadership, service, and personal growth. And it all kind of comes back to this idea of priesthood as this divinely delegated authority.
And as we get into this final part of his speech, you'll see how he really brings it all together. He offers some really practical advice on how to actually apply these principles in our lives.
Okay, so let's talk about that practicality. We've covered a lot of the theoretical stuff. But I'm sure our listeners are thinking, okay, how do I actually live this? How do I magnify my calling, as Oakes puts it, in a way that feels real?
One thing he emphasizes is it's not about trying to do everything at once or comparing yourself to others. He acknowledges that, everybody's life is different.
Right.
We all have different capacities and responsibilities.
So it's not about, suddenly becoming a superhero overnight.
Not at all. It's about starting where you are and making, the small, consistent efforts to improve. He uses a great analogy of a ship's rudder.
Okay.
Just a small adjustment to the rudder can change the entire course of the ship over time.
So even those tiny little course corrections can add up to make a big difference.
Exactly. It's about those daily choices, right?
Right.
There's, maybe seemingly small acts of service, of kindness. And over time, they compound and have this huge impact.
He tells this really interesting story, too, about a man who was feeling overwhelmed by, all these demands on his time, trying to juggle work, family, church responsibilities, personal goals, and just feeling really stretched thin.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Oh, for sure. And, Oakes uses this story to illustrate how important it is to seek, divine guidance, to take time to pray, to meditate, and really listen for that inner voice that can help us prioritize and make wise decisions.
It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life.
Yeah.
And lose sight of what matters most.
Yeah.
And he's encouraging us to step back, to create space for, reflection and to really reconnect with our core values.
And I love how he emphasizes that this process of seeking guidance is ongoing, right? It's not a one-time event. It's a daily practice of aligning ourselves with that higher purpose.
The calibrating a compass, right?
Yeah.
We need to constantly be checking in, making sure we're still headed in the right direction.
That's a great analogy. It makes me think about all the different ways we can receive guidance. It might be through prayer, meditation, spending time in nature, listening to music, or even just, having a deep conversation with a friend.
Absolutely. The key is to be open, right, to those little nudges, insights, moments of clarity
Yeah.
that can help us stay on course.
He also stresses that it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, we're all human. We're all going to stumble at times.
He even uses the phrase course correction, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not a beating ourselves up for our imperfections. It's about recognizing we're all on this journey of learning, of growing.
And those course corrections are actually essential to our progress.
Oh, for sure.
Like, when you're learning to ride a bike, you're going to fall a few times before you find your balance.
Exactly. And he wants us to view those stumbles not as failures, but as opportunities to learn.
So it's all about having that growth mindset, that belief that we can always learn, always improve.
He's a huge advocate for that. And he emphasizes that growth, it doesn't just benefit us, it has a ripple effect on everyone around us.
So as we kind of become more aligned with our higher purpose, as we strive to magnify our callings, it inspires others to do the same.
It's like this chain reaction of goodness. And that brings us to the heart of his message. We have this responsibility to be lights in the world.
So it's not just about, focusing on our own personal growth.
Right.
It's about sharing that light.
Exactly. He's challenging us to ask ourselves, what kind of legacy am I leaving? What impact am I making on the world around me?
It's about going beyond ourselves, recognizing that we're all connected.
And that our actions, no matter how small, can have this ripple effect that extends way beyond our immediate circle.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dallin H. Oakes' speech, The Powers of the Priesthood, what's the one message you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the most important thing is that we all have this power to make a difference. We all have these unique gifts and talents that we can use to uplift, inspire, serve others. And it doesn't require some grand title or position. It starts with those everyday choices, right?
Right.
Those small acts of kindness, compassion that over time create this ripple effect of goodness that truly can transform lives.
It's a beautiful message, and it's a reminder that we're all in this together. We each have this, this part to play in creating a better world.
And if we approach our lives with that sense of purpose, that commitment to magnifying our callings, who knows what we can accomplish?
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've been inspired to reflect on your own unique calling and to find those ways to magnify your impact in the world. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep shining your light.